chosen ones. You felt it, didn't you? That sudden silence above your head. The birds still flew, but everything else paused. No engines, no trails, just a thick, invisible stillness. While others scrolled and slept, you noticed the absence. You looked up, not with fear, but with awareness. They call it coincidence. We call it confirmation. This wasn't a routine airspace closure. There was no scheduled drill, no public alert, not even a whisper on the emergency radio bands. Yet, at 03 scene, the radar lines froze. The jets turned back. The satellites rerouted. Above you, a temporary no-fly zone was declared. But there was no war, no storm, just you. They didn't understand what your presence did to the field. Your vibration disrupted the flow. Your energy bent signals. You didn't hack the system. They just couldn't calculate you. That's what terrified them most. A man once decoded encrypted transmissions with only a hand-drawn circle and an ancient tongue. You operate like that, beyond logic, beneath layers, outside the grid. What they call anomalies, you call alignment. You didn't ask for this attention. You earned it by breathing a different air, the type that wakes codes up from stone and tells fire to stand still. They locked the sky, but forgot the ground beneath your feet still pulses with knowing. You are not waiting for permission to ascend. You are remembering that you already have. The aircraft weren't grounded because of danger. They were grounded because the truth couldn't fly past your field without being exposed. They know your presence scrambles more than just tech. It awakens things buried under decades of denial. Prophecies, protocols, and panic. But while they panicked, the message still moved. Through cracked frequencies, through flickering lights, through this moment. You were always going to read this at the exact second they tried to block it. They thought they could filter everything from the sky, shut down transmissions, scramble the unseen. But what you're sending isn't signal. It's soul. They positioned towers, redirected antennas, sent drones circling, scanning, sweeping the clouds for any irregular broadcast. But still, your resonance slipped through. Not because you tried to broadcast, but because you existed. A human being with no wires, no plugins, no formal access. And still, the frequency moved because you moved. They wrote protocols for electromagnetic anomalies. They calibrated sensors for solar flares and quantum glitches. But no protocol accounts for a soul that remembers itself mid-scroll, mid-nightmare, mid-numbness. The satellites were silenced, but you weren't. You became the interference they feared but couldn't name. Behind closed screens, analysts refreshed data they didn't understand. They saw heat signatures that didn't match, flickers of light over coordinates where no city should glow, names flagged by AI systems that matched no database, yet reoccurred in encrypted reports. And in the center of it, you, unassuming, unknown, uninvited, but not unprepared. Because this world underestimated what still pulses beneath the everyday mask. Your mind is not just mind, it's antenna. Your breath, not just oxygen, but a harmonic signature. You're not just waking up, you're becoming a disruption to their predictive models. They labeled it solar interference. That's what they told the public. But the only sun that interfered was the one rising in you. That heat, pure, radiant, unprogrammed, started to melt the illusion. All their data couldn't trace the source because it wasn't coming from a device. It was coming from your decision. The moment you chose to see differently, the transmission began, and it never needed wires to be felt. They're not afraid of the data, they're afraid of what the data reveals, that you can't be silenced. That the geometry of your being bends every line they draw around control. That you, without any authorization, are waking others up by existing. They see the ripple, but can't trace the stone. You are the stone, and every thought you refine is another message escaping their grid. They thought the sky was enough to contain you, but they forgot one thing. The sky never had your permission in the first place. And if you're broadcasting now, it's because the silence above finally made space for something far more ancient to be heard again. The cameras didn't catch it. The sensors didn't record it. But something moved that night, and it wasn't the wind. You walked, not with purpose anyone could decode, but with a knowing that made the earth beneath your steps vibrate. Not one person noticed. Not one satellite pinged. But the trees did. The birds did. The algorithms didn't see you, but the old energies did. That's how he walked too. Not needing applause, not seeking validation. Yeshua stepped through crowds that wanted to crown or crucify him, and they never saw what he was truly doing. They couldn't. He didn't come for attention. He came to activate what was asleep. You've felt the same pull. Not to be seen, but to see. And seeing has cost you. Relationships grew cold when you didn't comply. Rooms grew quiet when your presence changed the atmosphere. Conversations collapsed when truth entered. But like him, you didn't fight back with noise. You walked on. You kept moving through systems that tried to name you, frame you, or ignore you. You didn't fit the scripts. Neither did he. They tried to categorize him, teacher, rebel, heretic, prophet. But none of it stuck. His energy shattered every label, and so does yours. That's why the airspace went quiet. Because something was moving that couldn't be tracked. Not a missile, not a drone, but a soul that remembered how to walk like the veil was already torn. The silence above was not silence. It was reverence. Something in the realm they can't control recognized what was moving. You weren't just walking through streets. You were walking through timelines, bending them, reclaiming them, marking them with something holy. They built systems to monitor everything. Traffic, temperature, behavior, breath. But the one thing they can't measure is devotion. The kind that doesn't need a stage. The kind that burns like oil in a hidden lamps. That's what you carry. That's what scares them. Yeshua didn't need a throne to rule. He needed a hill and a silence loud enough to carry resurrection through time. And now, it's your footsteps echoing in dimensions that remember. You're not just walking, you're being recorded by realms unseen. Because every step taken in full awareness leaves behind a trail no drone can follow, but every seeker can find. It started with a glance. One simple upward shift of your gaze that wasn't casual, it was cosmic. You didn't look at the sky to admire it. You looked because something called you, not from above, but from within. And that moment, something shifted. Flight logs from that exact window began to glitch. Altitude data vanished from black box syncs. Control towers received scrambled updates. Flight paths redrew themselves mid-air. Some say it was solar interference. Others say pilot error. But deep within the classified briefings, the word used was anomaly, and your name hovered around it. You didn't board a plane. You didn't hack a terminal. You didn't even speak. But your awareness cracked something, because the systems weren't built to hold people who notice. They were built to guide the masses with invisible scripts. But you've never followed scripts. You've always read between the lines. And now, the sky has started responding. Planes rerouted, signals bounced, and a quiet wave passed through the control grid. They're still trying to pinpoint the moment. But it was the second your eyes left the screen and found the clouds. Why does that matter? Because attention is power. And when your attention broke through their noise, you accessed something older than aviation, older than geopolitics, older than every agreement ever signed beneath fluorescent lights. You remembered the sky is not just atmosphere, it's interface, a gateway, a memory. And your glance, innocent to most, was an initiation to some. They felt it. You didn't need permission. You carried authority no license could issue. Behind the curtain, those who monitor airspace watched as 3 aircraft disappeared from radar, not physically, but digitally. They still landed, they still flew, but their path untraceable, just like yours. You didn't enter the system, yet the system bent around you. A temporary void in the pattern, a void named presence. They want to call it malfunction, but machines don't malfunction when they're outmatched. They surrender, quietly. The sky didn't fight back, it paused. For you, because you didn't just look up, you connected. And the heavens know the difference. It's not what you saw, it's what saw you. And once that seeing took place, the records didn't disappear. They were hidden, protected. Because not everything sacred is meant to be stored in data logs anymore. You didn't hear it in the way the world defines sound. There were no decibels, no echoes bouncing off cathedral walls. It was quieter than silence and stronger than thunder. A whisper, not from outside, but from within. The moment your breath slowed and your thoughts paused, it came. Gentle, but undeniable. Like a memory you didn't know you had. You weren't meditating, you weren't chanting, you were simply still. And that stillness opened the door long ago. A man stood on a boat in chaos. The sea raged, the sky cracked, his friends panicked. But he spoke, and the winds obeyed. Not because his voice was loud, but because it carried something creation still recognizes: alignment. That same voice now speaks in frequencies that bypass ears. And it found you, not because you earned it, but because you remembered how to receive it. You've always sensed there was more to the quiet. You've always felt the pull behind closed eyes, that strange moment when time bends and your skin feels like it's not just skin anymore. That's where it speaks, not in language, but in essence, not to inform, but to activate. You didn't imagine that pull in your chest last night. You didn't make up the warmth in your palms when you woke at 3:03 a.m. That was resonance. This voice doesn't argue. It doesn't beg. It waits until you're ready to listen. And now you are. That's why everything around you feels like it's unzipping. Structures you leaned on collapsing. People you trusted vanishing. Not because you're cursed, but because the old can't walk where you're going. And the whisper only grows clearer in the empty space left behind. He never forced his way into hearts. He knocked. He paused. And when someone opened, the wind shifted. You've opened, even if you didn't mean to. Even if all you did was surrender for 5 seconds before scrolling again. That's all it takes. An inch of surrender creates miles of movement in the unseen. The whisper doesn't come with instructions. It comes with fire. It doesn't give you a step-by-step. It gives you knowing. And once it touches you, even the voices you once obeyed start to lose volume, because something ancient has started speaking again. And the next storm may not be calmed, but it will obey you when you speak. It wasn't in the news. There was no public statement, no announcement to decode, just a quiet change deep within the system. Flight paths that once cut across your region were suddenly altered. Routes shifted by a few degrees. Nothing drastic. Nothing that would alarm the average flyer. But to those who understand the language of air traffic, it was seismic. A decision had been made. Not because of weather, not because of politics, but because of you. Your coordinates were marked, not with a warning. With a reverence they won't speak aloud. Pilots received updates mid-flight. Controllers didn't question it. They followed protocol. But in the silence between commands, some asked themselves why. There was no turbulence, no threat. Yet their screens showed a clear void, a space to be honored, avoided, protected. And beneath that space, you were breathing, not broadcasting, just being. And that was enough to disrupt the flow. No alert was issued because they couldn't explain it. To say it out loud would be to admit that something, or someone, had risen beyond their reach. So they reshuffled the skies and hoped you wouldn't notice. But you felt it. That strange sense that the air around you had thickened, that your steps felt more deliberate, that even birds flew differently. You weren't imagining it. You were sensing the ripple of their decision. A global shift made to accommodate your emergence. They didn't do it out of fear. They did it out of instruction. Not the kind typed into a terminal, but the kind whispered through inner ears by systems older than aviation. You've touched something holy. And when that happens, even the unseen world makes space. This isn't about control, it's about convergence, about what happens when a soul begins to awaken in a world that built itself around slumber. You're not just remembering who you are, you're reminding the world what's real, without speaking, without signaling, without asking. Your existence is the signal somewhere. A flight path will change again tonight, not because of you, but because of what moves through you. And somewhere else, someone will wake up mid-flight and feel something shift. They won't know why, they won't remember where, but the coordinates will echo in their spirit. Because once an airspace honors you, the rest of the sky begins to listen too. They knew him, or at least they thought they did. They remembered the boy with calloused hands and quiet eyes. They remembered the family name, the street he walked, the way he disappeared into the background. So when he returned, radiant, clear, awakened, they couldn't reconcile it. The carpenter became a mirror, and the mirror showed them what they had buried. Their response wasn't celebration, it was rejection. Not because he changed, but because his change reminded them of their choice not to. You feel this too, not in ancient synagogues, but in present silence. In the way familiar rooms grow colder when you enter, in the way eyes shift when your presence stretches beyond the identity they framed for you. You're not loud, you don't need to be, but they feel the quiet pressure of your transformation. They can't name it, but it unsettles them. Because the version of you they could control no longer exists, and the new version can't be predicted. You don't belong to where you came from anymore. That's not bitterness, it's clarity. Your awakening isn't a betrayal, it's alignment. But to those who never left their old patterns, it feels like war. Your silence becomes defiance. Your growth becomes threat. And suddenly, those who once supported you begin to retreat. Not because you're wrong, but because you've outgrown their comfort. Yeshua didn't beg them to understand. He spoke truth, let the tension breathe, and moved on. He didn't water down the message to be accepted. He honored the calling, even when the calling led him to rejection. You felt this same ache, that sting of becoming invisible in places where you once felt seen. But you're not losing people. You're losing illusions. You're not being abandoned. You're being positioned. There's a strange comfort in knowing the light was unwelcome in his own town, because it means your isolation isn't random. It's prophetic. You were never meant to be understood by everyone, only by the ones with eyes to see and ears to hear. And if some rooms no longer hold space for your voice, it's because your frequency now speaks in a dialect only destiny can interpret. The distance you're experiencing isn't punishment. It's separation before elevation. And elevation always begins in silence. Just like Nazareth before the fire spread. It wasn't the weather. It wasn't solar storms. It wasn't software. The technicians checked everything. Circuitry intact. Signals strong. Satellites fully operational. But still, something fractured. Blips vanished. Coordinates collapsed. Flight tracking screens went black, just for a moment, just long enough for confusion to set in. And all of it aligned with the moment you stepped across your threshold. No sound, no announcement, just a step. But that step released a pulse they still can't explain. Your presence did something to the frequency grid, not in theory, not symbolically, physically. You moved and the field shifted. You breathed and the atmosphere adjusted. You didn't try to disrupt. You simply lived in alignment. And alignment, in a world built on distortion, becomes interference. But not interference as they define it. It's not chaos, it's correction. Their radars weren't attacked. They were overwhelmed by the presence of something unclassified. You've always known there was more to you. That your body is a vessel but not the message. That your skin holds voltage. That your heart holds code. But this time, the environment knew it too. Machines couldn't locate you. Devices glitched around you, not because you were hiding, but because your vibration transcended the range they're calibrated to detect. You are no longer where you were, not just in space, but in spectrum. They didn't speak of it publicly, but it echoed through restricted channels. The incident logs show brief anomaly. That's what they call it. But those who watched the radar screens knew it wasn't brief. It was timeless. For a few seconds, The structure of surveillance collapsed, and in its place, silence. Not the absence of information, but the presence of something they weren't trained to observe. Your walk is not neutral anymore. The ground knows you. The air bends around your decisions. You aren't trying to be seen, but your essence is undeniable now. You aren't seeking influence. You are radiating clarity, and clarity confuses control systems. The more you align, the more the world reveals its codes, and with each step forward, something ancient within you begins to hum. They'll try to reset the radars. They'll run diagnostics again. But deep down, they know. They didn't arrest him at first. They watched, quietly, strategically. They tracked his movements not through documents or devices, but through whispers and shadows. He spoke, and crowds formed. He touched, and laws bent. He moved through cities, not as a threat with weapons, but as a presence with weight. And that weight drew attention. The kind that doesn't knock, it lingers. The kind that monitors without revealing itself. That's what you're feeling now, not fear, observation. The soft pressure of eyes that don't blink, of systems that were told to monitor but not engage. You haven't been silenced. You haven't been stopped, but you've been seen. And not in the way you once hoped. Not for validation or applause, but by those who measure vibration, who read movement not by what you post, but by what pulses beneath your silence. You feel the watchman, don't you? The shift in the room when you speak truth. The pause in a conversation when your frequency hits too deep. They're not enemies. They're readers of patterns. And your pattern doesn't match the script they were given. Yeshua walked into temples and said things they weren't prepared to hear, not because they were loud, but because they were true. Truth doesn't need volume to cause disruption. It just needs embodiment. That's what you've become. A walking disruption. A living contradiction to the systems designed to predict, contain, and direct behavior. You're not breaking rules. You're breaking the illusion that the rules ever held you in the first place. They try to document your energy in reports. They try to make it linear, to reduce it to a personality, a motive, a psychological profile. But it won't stick, because like him, your essence slips past labels. They see your face, but they can't name your origin. They hear your voice, but they can't locate the fire behind it. And that disturbs the grid. He knew he was watched. And still, he walked. Not to provoke, to fulfill. You know this path. You're not trying to draw attention. But attention now follows you. Because presence cannot be hidden when purpose has awakened. Let them observe. Let them monitor. What they're witnessing is the slow unraveling of everything they believed was in control. And still, you walk forward. It wasn't supposed to happen. That briefcase was sealed, not just with code, but with intent. It had sat untouched for years, passed from one official to another, locked under fluorescent lights and behind titanium doors. Its contents were restricted to the highest level, not because of danger, but because of mystery. It was never opened out of curiosity. It was waiting for an event, a face, a signal. And that signal wasn't digital. It was you. You didn't apply for clearance. You didn't knock on any door. You didn't even know the case existed. But the moment your image passed through their system, a dormant sequence activated. A low-level analyst thought it was an error. A senior officer stared in silence. And someone, far from the public eye, stood up without a word and walked toward the vault. There was no debate. The codes entered themselves. The locks released. And the briefcase opened. Inside, they didn't find weapons. They found writings, symbols, maps that didn't match known continents, a voice print embedded in crystal, some of it ancient, some of it not yet created. At the center, your signature. Not written in ink, but in frequency. A pulse, recorded long before you were born, matched exactly. No one spoke. Because how do you explain something that breaks your understanding of time? You are not just a person, you are a pattern, a signal wrapped in skin. And the systems built to protect secrets are beginning to realize they were never protecting against you. They were preparing for you. That's the shift they can't admit. That's why they're watching without interference. Because every time you breathe, the codes inside that briefcase begin to rearrange. Somewhere in a quiet room, someone's job has changed. Their orders are no longer to secure information, but to observe the unfolding of what you unlock. They're tracking your words now, not out of fear, but out of necessity. Because you are saying things the documents hinted at, but never fully explained. Your presence is filling in the blanks, not with data, but with essence. And the case that was once guarded with silence is now echoing with memory. They don't understand what they've opened, not yet. But the case is no longer sealed. There are some truths too large for doctrine, some energies too vast to be contained in ancient scrolls or digital archives. They exist outside of permission, beyond interpretation. And every once in a generation, that energy doesn't just move through thunder. It takes form, not a metaphor, not a myth, but a presence cloaked in clouds, wrapped in light, eyes burning with something that doesn't age. He was seen like that once, before the world had names for such things. And he's still riding, not away. Toward, you felt the pulse of it in your bones, not fear, but remembrance. Like the moment the sky changes color before the storm hits, like the feeling that the air around you is pregnant with something ancient. It's not coming, it's returning. And the return doesn't announce itself with headlines. It echoes through those who can feel the atmosphere before it shifts. That's why your body's been acting strange, why you've been waking up in the night with pressure in your chest and visions you don't remember in the morning. You're being tuned, not for chaos, for clarity. He doesn't descend to impress. He doesn't ride with legions for spectacle. The clouds part because the earth remembers him, because everything created bends in recognition when he moves. And now, that movement is in sync with yours, not because you're equal to it, but because you've surrendered to it. You're not summoning him, you're aligning with him. That's why the airspace locked. That's why the systems blinked. Because they recognized a convergence even their most advanced intelligence couldn't forecast. Somewhere, someone is watching the skies again. Not for storms, not for threats, but because the algorithms they trust are starting to act alive. Lights are flickering in patterns they can't decode. A new frequency is pulsing in the background noise. They don't know how to explain it, but the word arrival keeps surfacing in their dreams. He doesn't need clearance to return. He doesn't need consensus to appear. The clouds are not his hiding place. They are his throne. And the next time you look up and see something glowing in the distance, know this: it's not light reflecting off metal. It's the fire in eyes that have never forgotten you, and they're closer than you think.